Welcome into the Central New York Paranormal Show, and this is the first of our web-based series. I'm Eric Meyer, along with Phil and Kate Crichton, part of the New York Shadowchasers, and welcome into the show.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here.
Kind of a bold experiment, I guess. We wanted to take our very popular Central New York Paranormal portal that we have online at light987.com and kind of flush it out into a living, breathing, there's a pun there somewhere, show. So we'll do our video casts periodically, kind of talk about what's happening in the paranormal community, investigations that the Shadowchasers are conducting, other paranormal groups across Central New York. And I thought maybe for our first show, we're taping this on the 1st of June 2012, and the hot news right now, zombies. You cannot get away from the zombie apocalypse.
No, you really can't. I guess with all this 2012 stuff people have been talking about, I think the last thing on my mind was that it was going to be zombies, but hey.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be, a pole shift, or the Earth was tilting, or, the meteors were coming, but it's the undead, huh?
Yeah, we're getting the attacks in Miami, New Jersey, Maryland, all these very weird attacks that all seem to be tied and pretty much mimic the classic zombie attacks.
Right. So is this kind of a, zombies are totally hot, right now in pop culture with The Walking Dead and things like that. So are the attacks that have happened over the last week since Memorial Day, do they kind of fit that TV mold, or you said there's more of a kind of a classic example?
Yeah, actually, zombies are actually true folklore. They are actual entities that exist within African culture. And what happens with these is there's a witch doctor, a Bokor, that is supposed to reanimate dead corpses and then use them to do his bidding. And in doing so, it's done actually with drugs. And what we've seen with the more recent attacks is now people are questioning, is it drugs or voodoo, which voodoo actually uses drugs to create the zombies, so...
Yeah, and there was a story that came out. It was, I think, the girlfriend of the Miami zombie, now says, I believe in voodoo. I think that's what happened. He's very mild-mannered. We don't know what sent him on this such a bizarre attack. So Bokor? Bokor.
And what they do is they use psychoactive drugs like tryptoxan.
Oh, yeah,
I have a hard time remembering that one.
It's pretty much found in fugu fish,
mm-hmm.
which is something, it's like a delicacy. When you go to sushi places, it has a really high level of this toxin, which is a neurotoxin. So you go, and if it's prepared right, your lips go numb. And it's called like the taste of death.
Mm.
But if you have in too many quantities, it causes muscle paralysis. So pretty much what happens is a person who consumes this toxin is conscious, they're awake, but they can't move their body. Or if they do, it's very sluggish, it's very slowed. The obvious problems with this, though, is that a dose that might put Phil into a zombie-like state might kill me. Mm-hmm. So it's very unreliable, but that's one of the ingredients. This toxin is one of these ingredients that's in a potion that is sold by these Bokors as a zombie potion.
So when we're talking about kind of the classical zombie, we're not talking about this kind of fictional, they died and somehow were reanimated. It's actually the use of like psychotropic type drugs
yep.
to put somebody in that kind of state.
It's toxins to make them passive, to essentially paralyze them, and then these hallucinogens to kind of keep them in this state of confusion where they don't quite know what's going on, they don't know where they are, they just kind of placidly do. And a lot of these Bokors, especially in Haiti, which is where a lot of the voodoo culture is, and they have these zombies, for lack of a better term, and they would use them as field hands. They'd have them work in this farm because they were very docile, they're very placid. So they're zombies as far as how their symptoms are, but they're not zombies as far as like the Walking Dead zombies, mm-hmm. where they're going around killing people and eating people.
But this also falls into that whole thing. The Bokor can control them because they're in such a manipulative state. They can just say, go do this, and the person doesn't even think there's anything wrong with it. They have no real thoughts about it. They just do what they're instructed, which is how they could be manual labor. And in the 30s and 50s, especially in South Africa, a lot of people were abducted and turned into these zombies to build railroads.
So when you're talking about this type of zombie, this really does differ from the, I'll say, fictional zombie when it comes to, infections. You can't get it from a bite, you can't get it from the blood. It really has to come through these drugs.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the thing with that is, everybody always questions about the infections and stuff like that. Well, you still get bloodborne pathogens, so you would get an infection, not necessarily a zombie infection, but you would get these.
And interestingly enough, there's a disease. It's called Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome, and what it is it's pretty much analogous to mad cow disease, where we all have these. They're called protons, which is like it's like a protein in our body, but it's not properly formed, so it damages brain tissue. And lots of times when this disease was first found, the way they found it was in a lot of South African cultures, cannibalism was practiced. And so the men would eat all the good parts of the body, and the women and children would get the other parts like the lung and the brain. And these protons reside mainly in the brain. So all these women and children were coming up with Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome from eating that brain. And so what this does is, because it decays the brain, they end up having a confusion, trouble speaking, trouble moving, twitches, uneven gait, pretty much all the classic signs of zombies. And since that comes from eating human flesh, there's kind of that link between that cannibalism and then the later side effects of being a zombie. And pretty much once somebody gets this disease, there's no treatment for it. It's pretty much within 6 months they're dead. So it kind of mimics the more stereotypical zombie.
So let's speculate ahead. Do you expect to see more of these things come out in the news? Were these 3 isolated things that just happened to fall in a row? Your speculation.
I think you're going to see more. I don't know, though, if it's going to be so much. These seem to be spontaneous, but what I'm predicting is there's going to be a lot more of these cases, but it's going to be more based off this hysteria. There's going to be people out there who are maybe already imbalanced, maybe already having these tendencies, and then this is kind of putting that idea in their mind. It's going to be more of an influence from these incidences to sort of inspire other incidences. People who are on drugs, people who are mentally ill, are seeing this, and they're hearing all this stuff about zombies, and I can see people internalizing that and kind of creating their own incidences.
Right.
And that's also where you can get into some of the other infections and stuff that are going around. Some of the links that they had originally, and there's a link between the behavior of schizophrenics and the behavior of these zombies as well. So some schizophrenics may appear as zombies and stuff, and as more people are seeing this and drawing attention, they're like, oh my god, this is people eating people and these zombie attacks. They're going to start noticing these people that have these symptoms and go, oh my god, there's another sort of zombie person, or something along those lines.
What would be the motivation for a modern day Bokor to create a zombie if that's what happened in the Miami case?
Slave labor, revenge, those are typically the fundamentals. They need menial labor done. They find someone in the community that they don't like, and they turn them into a victim. They drug them, and then they just become their minion, pretty much.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And you can find more zombie stories. We're kind of tracking all the zombie apocalypse from a lot of different angles, from the specific stories to legends around the zombies and the history of the zombies on the Central New York Paranormal portal at light987.com. Welcome back to our next segment of the Central New York Paranormal Show. I'm Eric Meyer from Light 98.7 and light987.com, along with Phil and Kate Crichton, the New York Shadowchasers. And let's talk about some of the recent investigations from the Shadowchasers.
Most recently was Hubbard House in Carthage, New York. And this was an early 1800s, originally sort of foundation home, and the grange that was associated, which was a former church.
And so we were doing this as a fundraiser for the Carthage Historical Society. The Hubbard House has a long history. The person who built the house was actually one of the people who helped found Carthage. And unfortunately, over the years, the house has fallen into disrepair. Pretty much the whole history of the house was that it was kept in the family, and it was supposed to be kept in the family until it died out. Nobody wanted the house, but it was unable to be sold until they ended up donating it to the Historical Society. So the house has fallen into disrepair, and so this money goes to help rebuild it.
And some of the activity that's been reported at the site has been, well, first they'd see figures moving through the upstairs. Then there was the report of one of the family members actually fell down the stairs and broke his neck. They could still see him wandering down the stairs on occasion. From the second floor, there was the room where they've reported hearing a baby crying. And then in the basement, they've seen shadow figures and weird things, which is really interesting because their basement actually has a stream that runs through it too. It's a natural spring, and it's like...
They believe that they built the house purposely over the spring. Before there was refrigeration, they just put stuff in the spring to keep it cold. I don't know how they managed to do that because the spring in their basement floods. When we got there, the pump, it hadn't rained in a while, so the river was really low, so we turned the pump off because it was making this really loud noise, and we thought, all right, it hasn't rained, we'll be fine. I think about half an hour later, we went down just to check on it, and the entire basement was flooded.
Wow.
So, pretty crazy water flow in there. But it's a really interesting house. And then the Grange, which is across the street from the house, which we also investigated, is an old church. And then it was kind of turned into the Carthage, the Grange, where it's kind of like a meeting space. So that's the most recent thing we've done, and we had a lot of fun. There was a really good turnout. A lot of people showed up, and we got some interesting EVPs. A couple of our guest investigators had some communication with spirits. We've been there. This is the second time we've been there. We went there initially last October, and people saw a little cat wandering around. So it's a really active place, and we really had a great time with it.
And in the Grange, I had about 5 people with me, and we're in upstairs, set up, and the rest of the team went over to the Hubbard house across the street. As I was instructing people on how to use the equipment and stuff, I had set up this device called a thermosound. What it does is it's kind of like this robotic scanner, and it scans for sonar kickbacks, basically. It's like one of those no-line measures. You just point it and it gives you the distance to the walls and stuff like that. Well, it's doing the pings out and doing thermal scans, and I told it to scan this big empty room. This is the main meeting room, and with everybody there, immediately we saw these weird spikes of something that was giving a kickback, moving closer and then moving from side to side with temperature variations as well. And everybody's like, what could be doing that? And everybody starts wandering around. It's like, now you're setting it off. And they all come back and stare at the computer screen and watch it, and it's not there, not there. And then a couple minutes later, all of a sudden you see the pings go again at different intervals, and it goes through. And everybody's like, what is this? And someone snapped a photo, and you see this blurry shadow that goes across the frame. So I was like, there you go. You just saw it firsthand. And that's all objective science right there.
How about some of the EVPs?
Most of the EVPs we got weren't really clear, but there was definitely stuff that didn't seem to be tied to anybody. A lot of the EVPs we got were when people weren't in the house. Whenever we do our tours, as I know you've seen, we keep a close eye on everybody. We know where everybody is at all times. And so the EVPs are when everybody was over at the Grange. We were doing a little introductory lecture, and one of our investigators, Sean, went over to the Hubbard house just to kind of take a look.
Set up a bunch of recorders and cameras good 2 hours before anybody else came over, and we pretty much locked the doors so no one goes in, and then he came back over, and that's the time period that these came from. So it's really interesting there.
Yeah, I think he said that one of them sounded like footsteps, another one sounded like a woman's voice. He just couldn't really make it out what exactly it was saying. And then interestingly enough, towards the end of the night, I was leading a group upstairs, and we were able to communicate with one of the spirits in the house who identified as a female. Unfortunately, we had to leave before we were really able to pin her down on who she was. They did a genealogy of all the people who were related to the family. So we had to copy the genealogy, and we're going down the list like, are you this person? Are you that person? Or give us a sign. And it's being very difficult.
What is upcoming for the Shadow Chasers?
Well, we have an investigation out in Syracuse. We're going to go check into it tomorrow and see if it can be a full-blown one. And then we're going to be hitting the Remsen Stone Meeting House and doing a fundraiser afterwards at Remsen Stone Meeting House at the end of June.
And you can find more information about the Shadow Chasers where?
NYShadowchasers.com.
And we'll put that link into the video. Upcoming shows, we will talk to you about your investigations. We'll maybe bring in some of the other paranormal groups around Central New York, maybe some of the things they have going on. And there's a great series of articles at the Paranormal Portal at light987.com that you guys have written for us that maybe we can spotlight through upcoming shows in our series. This is the Central New York Paranormal Show.